In this section, we'll be looking at the process of digestion. And then what is digestion? It is the breakdown and the conversion of large insoluble molecules into smaller soluble molecules which can be absorbed by the body. Okay, so here we're breaking down, we're converting whatever molecule was insoluble. It means it could not dissolve in solvents such as water, for example, of insoluble molecules into smaller ones that are now soluble so that they can dissolve and be transported and be absorbed by the body. But then we have the question, why is there a need for digestion? Now, when we eat, if you look at the food that we eat, it's such in large pieces. But this food is destined to feed or to go into the cells of our body. If you remember what cells are, they are extremely small. And cells are bound by a membrane called that the cell membrane. And nutrients, material have to seep into this cell membrane. Whatever the cell needs in terms of nutrients, oxygen, or minerals, they have to move from the outside to go inside these cell membranes. But the cell membrane has very little pores. That's why it's permeable. Although it's permeable, it's not accessible, or not large chunks of material can actually enter through that cell membrane. So the substances that must enter through the cell membrane must be infinitely very, very small. And again, if you look at the food that we eat, the pieces are too large to be able to enter inside the cell, passing through the cell membrane. Hence, they need to be broken down into smaller pieces, simpler forms, such that they can be fitting, or their size can fit to pass through the cell membrane and enter inside the cell. So that is the reason why all foods that we eat must get broken down by that process of digestion, so that we can generate simpler molecules, simpler units that have a size enough to fit through the pores of the cell membrane, so that the cell can then have them coming into the cell and use them to build cellular structures like the cell membrane, the nuclear membrane, the cytoplasmic inclusions, and to provide energy for the cell to stay alive by using the mitochondria. So that is the reason why food needs to be digested. There are then two major processes by which food can be digested. The first one is mechanical digestion. When we say mechanical, we actually mean physical, because it is a breakdown of food materials by a physical process which involves the action of muscles. Okay, although muscles are involved, it also in the mouth involves the action of teeth. When teeth bite, when they chew, when they grind, that action is physical. And we then have muscles of the rest of the alimentary canal, because in the remaining parts of the alimentary canal, there are no teeth found. They are just actions of muscles. These muscles squeeze and crush food, making it softer, breaking it from large complex molecules to simpler molecules. That's still digestion, but in this case, it is physical. So it helps to just break down food molecules into smaller pieces, so that it exposes an increased surface area for the action of enzymes. Now, how does it increase this surface area so that enzymes can then act on it? Take, for instance, you have a piece of chalk. In one case, you have the piece of chalk as whole, as it is. And in another case, you have another piece of chalk that you are going to now crush into powder form. So I have two forms that the chalk is presented. In one form, it's not crushed. I'll call that A. It's a traditional piece the way you know it. And in another form, it is crushed into powder. I'll call that B. Now, if I have to put them on a surface and try to spread it out, I'm sure the one A, where it's not crushed, will remain as it is. Meanwhile, the one B, I can actually spread it out over a large surface. Hence, the crushed one, the powder one, can be spread to occupy a larger surface. And if I have to put the two forms inside water, the one A, which is not crushed, will not get wet easily or completely, because for it to get wet, it has to get wet on the outside, and the molecules, the particles that are on the inside also need to get wet. It means water has to seep through many layers to get to the last particle, which is found right in the core of the piece of chalk, in the case of A, where it is not crushed. Meanwhile, in the case of B, where it is crushed to powder form, if I put it in water, all of the particles will even get wet at the same time. Why is it so? Because it has been crushed to spread over a large surface area. Hence, water can easily touch that large surface area at every point. So that is what breaking down into pieces does. When we have that physical action, that physical breakdown of food into pieces, it spreads to occupy a larger surface, or it spreads such that enzymes, in this case my enzymes will be like water, such that enzymes can have access to every little piece of it at the same time. This is to help facilitate and to speed up digestion. Now, what are these enzymes? You did enzymes in grade 10. Enzymes are biological catalysts that speed up the rate of chemical reactions in biological systems like the body, for example. So we'll have different enzymes which are then going to be involved in chemical digestion, which is the breakdown of food materials by enzymes. Now, this breakdown occurs by the process of hydrolysis. When we say hydro, we should always think of water, hydrolysis. Lysis is breakdown. So we are here breaking down large complex molecules which are insoluble, and the breakdown is done so that we generate smaller, simpler soluble molecules by the chemical addition of water. So we're adding water, that's why we're calling it hydro, to large insoluble molecules so that we break them down. That's why we call it lysis. Breakdown of large complex molecules by adding water to these complex molecules. And who are the ones who speed up this breakdown? The enzymes, the biological catalyst. So two forms of digestion: mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. The enzymes which are involved in chemical digestion are divided into three categories. We have carbohydrates. From the name carbohydrates, you should then understand that they are involved in breaking down or in hydrolyzing carbohydrates into simpler sugars such as glucose. If you remember your grade 10 work, we had three forms of sugars. All sugars were referred to as carbohydrates. We had the monosaccharides, the disaccharides, and the polysaccharides. And monosaccharides are simple sugars of one unit only, simple unit. We'll see them here. One unit, another unit. These monosaccharides were, for example, glucose or maltose. And we had disaccharides, for example, sucrose or fructose. And we had polysaccharides, for example, starch. Okay. Polysaccharides made up of many sugar units. You see these ones here are bonded together so that we have many polysaccharides or many sugar units. Now, these enzymes function at different pH. pH is the degree of acidity or alkalinity of an environment. So, carbohydrates, we'll see an example in the mouth, salivary amylase. Carbohydrates function at an alkaline pH of about 7,2. That's alkaline pH at which these carbohydrates will function. And we have it here in the saliva, present in the mouth, and also in the small intestine to continue with digestion, which would have started in the mouth. So that's what carbohydrates do. Another enzyme or another group of enzymes are proteases. From the name again, it suggests that they digest proteins, and proteins are broken down into amino acids. Again, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. It means we put amino acids together, like we have here. We put small units of amino acids together. You will see the shapes are different because we have different types of amino acids. For example, alanine, valine, threonine, asparagine, and so on. So we have different types of amino acids. We put amino acids together in a particular sequence, in a particular order, so that we can then first generate a polypeptide, and we can also generate what we call a protein. You'll see now the amino acids are totally bonded together. They are large molecules, okay, polymers. Now, the proteases occur in the stomach and is again also in the small intestine. Just like we had the carbohydrates occurring also in the small intestine, you will realize that most of these enzymes will occur always additionally in the small intestines. Now, in the stomach, the proteases will prefer to work at an acidic pH of about 2. While in the small intestine, the enzymes in general there will work at an alkaline pH of about 7,2. The next set of enzymes will be lipases. Lipases, from the name again, they hydrolyze lipids, which otherwise also referred to as fats, into fatty acids and glycerol. So we have two basic subunits of lipids, fatty acids and glycerol. You see this also in grade 10. So fatty acids, like we've seen here, would have a different shape compared to glycerol, or either ways around. So when they are bonded together, they form lipids. And these lipids are broken down by lipases, such as the human pancreatic lipase, for example. And these lipases are produced by the pancreas and act in the small intestine at a pH of about 8, which is alkaline pH. So those are the three groups of enzymes that are going to be involved in chemical digestion. We have carbohydrates, we have proteases, we have lipases. Carbohydrates break down carbohydrates, proteases break down proteins, lipases break down lipids. How is water involved in the movement of food along the alimentary canal? Now, water will facilitate the movement of food along the alimentary canal in two major ways. First, it will increase the liquidity of food by making it move freely, or it increases the liquidity of food, which will then make the food move freely along the alimentary canal. Take, for instance, if the food was very dry and the alimentary canal itself was dry, it means it will not be slippery. The food will not easily move through the alimentary canal. It will be stuck all the time. So water will make it much more liquid such that it flows literally through the alimentary canal. Again, the water assists in making the food move freely along the alimentary canal by keeping the surrounding tissues of the alimentary canal. That means the linings of the gut, for example, the lining of the stomach, the lining of the intestine, of the esophagus, is kept soft and pliable. It means it can be twisted around, it can be moved around. It's kept soft so that it's slippery, so that it can expand easily, because sometimes we swallow big chunks of food, and for example, the circumference of the esophagus is supposed to somehow expand to allow the food to go down into the stomach. How is it able to expand? It's able to do so because the wall of the esophagus is not rigid. The rigidity is reduced by the presence of water because it is hydrated. So it's able to then expand because it's soft and pliable, such that food can easily move down the alimentary tract. Where then does the water come from? The water that's used to make food to move along the alimentary tract. Where does it come from? The water comes from the food that we eat. No matter how you look at it, even the biscuits that look very dry have some amount of water in them. Okay. It then tells you that all the food that you eat already contains some amount. So the water could come from the food that we eat, or it could also come from the water that we drink directly during the course of the day or along with the food as we are eating. And the water that is then used again in the process of digestion or to facilitate digestion can be added together as part of the secretions that we have here. Throughout the process of digestion, we will be having secretions from saliva, gastric juice, pancreatic juice, intestinal juice or succus entericus, and bile. All these secretions are liquids, and these liquids are made up of at least 90% water. So they additionally put more water into the food to make it easy to move along the alimentary canal. So that is the role of water in moving food along the alimentary